Let me know if I am audible to you now. Yes, okay, good. Let's start with the discussion then. Again, voice is not there. Okay, let me see. Sir, Sukhvinder sir. Am I audible? Please respond. You are not audible. Not clear. Yes, I am audible now to everyone. Please respond. Now audible? Okay. So let's begin with the discussion, right? So these are the set of topics that we are going to discuss today. The first one is going to be WTO's 12th Ministerial Conference, very important from your GS2 perspective. आपके मेंस में भी इस पे क्वेश्चन आ सकता है because this is the recent meet that happened, and as well as in your prelims WTO is always important, right? So इसके बारे में हम डिटेल में डिस्कशन करेंगे आज के सेशन में, right? गुड आफ्टरनून टू एवरीवन, हेलो टू एवरीवन, राइट? यहाँ पे ध्यान से बैठिए, you will get to learn a lot many things, right? Now the next topic will be Sant Tukaram. Again, he is related to the Bhakti movement. Again, a very important topic from your history perspective, from your art and culture perspective. Bhakti movement में mains में हो चाहे prelims में हो, there is always a possibility that a question will be asked, right? So जैसे कि Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, a very renowned saint of Bhakti movement, a question has already been asked on that personality in your mains examination. So similar question can be asked on Sant Tukaram also, right? So it's again very important. Then the next topic that we will discuss is the Child Labor Day. Again, a very important topic because I'll give you a lot of significant statistics or data points in this topic that you will be able to use in your answers or essays or any ethics answer also, wherever you write about children in India or now. Please please see if I am audible again. I have made some corrections. Is there? It's okay right now. Divya, Amulya, Suraj, please tell me, are you able to hear me? Nisha? Now it's okay? Okay, I am very sorry for the inconvenience. There is some technical issue that we are facing. So अगर आपको फिर से आवाज़ नहीं आएगी, please tell me again. Right? थोड़ा बहुत बीच में it might happen. Now let's without any delay, let's start the discussion. The first topic that we'll be discussing will be on the WTO's Ministerial Conference, right? So before we discuss about the outcomes of the conference, let's first know about WTO in detail. जैसे मैंने आपको पहले बताया था, आपके GS2 के पेपर के लिए this topic is very very important. So हम basic से start करेंगे, इसके origin, इसके purposes, इसके aim से, and then we'll proceed further, right? So see, this WTO is a very important organization. It was established first in 1995, as you can see in the slide also, right? It was first established in 1995. ठीक है? So basically, जैसे कि you know the full form is World Trade Organization. So that means this organization is focused on promoting, regulating, you know, the world trade. पूरे entire world में जितना भी trade we do between various countries, the trade that happens, that is what is overlooked by this organization, that is WTO, right? So see, जब आप initially see multilateralism की history देखिए, see, initially there use, you know, the world did not have multilateral bodies या ऐसे कोई international institutions हमारी दुनिया में नहीं होते थे. Can you tell me which was the first, you know, international institution in the modern era that was set up, you know, to give guidance to the entire world? Yes, Shreya, very good. You are right. It was the League of Nations in 1921. That was the first international institution that was established in the modern history of the world, right, to manage the world affair, right? अब इसके बाद, because League of Nations आपने world history में पढ़ा होगा, was not able to perform its function very well. That is why we saw World War II happening, right? And when World War II happened, at that time countries realized that we need another better, good functioning international institutions that could promote peace, prosperity and trade in the world, right? And at that time we saw the establishment of another important international institutions, that is UN, and also financial institutions like World Bank, IMF and GATT. GATT, that is General Agreement on Trade, right? Yes, you are all right, United Nations. So that means this phenomena of having international institutions to promote cooperation among all the countries in various spheres, be it establishing peace, be it ensuring growth and development of the countries, be it promoting trade among the countries, that began in 1950s, 40s, you can say, right? In the mid 1940s, that is when we started having multilateral institutions, right? Now one such institution or body or agreement was GATT. This focused on trade, the world trade. जितना भी दुनिया में countries they used to trade, that was monitored under the GATT agreement, right? General Agreement on Trade and Transportation, that was there, right? So this used to be the focus of, you know, activity. At that time UN was established to, you know, ensure peace in the world, while World Bank and IMF acted as the financial institutions, and this was meant to promote trade. General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Right, so this used to be the, you know, agreement. 1947 में it came up. The basic underlining fact of this agreement was to minimize the barriers, to minimize the trade barriers that happen, and to ensure free flow of trade among the various nations. ठीक है, इसका focus क्या था? To promote barrier free trade among the countries, right? So it remained in the, you know, vogue, in the power for some time, but then we see over the years, we saw that it had some drawbacks. We will discuss that in detail. And to fulfill the need of free world trade, we see the establishment of a new body, that is the World Trade Organization. ठीक है, so GATT को replace करके we saw the establishment of WTO with the Marrakesh Agreement. With the Marrakesh Agreement, here see, in 1994 Marrakesh Agreement was signed to replace GATT with another institution, that is WTO, right? So that is how WTO originated. The aim of establishing this WTO was basically to facilitate and regulate international trade. जितना भी countries एक दूसरे के साथ trade करती हैं, चाहे वो goods में हो, चाहे services में हो, all that be overlooked by World Trade Organization now. Right? उसमें जितने भी rules and regulations है, that will be made by WTO, and all the facilitation work, that is reducing taxation, non-taxation barriers, that all will be overlooked by WTO. ठीक है, यहाँ तक समझ आया that what is GATT, how we moved to WTO, and what is the aim of WTO, the basic purpose of WTO, right? That is how it is. So today almost 164 countries are part of this WTO. That means 98% of the world's trade, almost 98% of the world's trade is under the ambit of WTO. That means WTO is making rules, regulations and facilitation, measures it is taking to for managing the entire world trade, 98% of the world trade, right? Yes. Now let's see in detail that what are the aims. As I told you, WTO came up to promote world trade. So सारे इसके measures will be related to world trade, right? So सबसे पहला the measure is involved on promoting world trade. ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा countries के बीच में trade हो, so that they are able to benefit from mutual advantages. ऐसा हो सकता है that I as a country make shoes well and you as a country make pens well. We can exchange those goods. We both can benefit. I can get quality pens from you. You can get quality boots or shoes from me. Right, in that way we will be earning additional income also. I have an additional market, that is your country, your country's population. You have an additional market, that is my country and my country's population, right? In that way WTO first focuses on liberalization of world trade. Liberalization, liberty जैसे आप समझते हैं, to free the international trade of all kind of barriers. ना तो कोई भी country taxation heavy लगाए या non taxation barriers लगाए, that to ensure that WTO is functioning, liberalizing the world trade, right? सबसे पहले इसका motive क्या ही है, दुनिया में सारे trade को बढ़ाना, ठीक है? So first function is to make such provisions that help in liberalization of world trade, right? The second aim is, right, to अब देखिए world trade हो रहा है, so it's possible that we need to set some rules in which way we are going to trade with each other, right? So to set those rules and to enforce those rules, that is also a role played by WTO, right? To enforce and set rules for the entire world trade, that is also being done by WTO. That is its second objective, right? उसके बाद देखिए, if two people are trading, two people are coming in connect, there is always a possibility of dispute. ठीक है, जब जैसे वो कहते हैं दो बर्तन हैं तो एक साथ जब आएंगे तो आवाज तो करेंगे ही, right? In that manner, when two or multiple parties are engaging, there is a possibility of disputes, conflicts, disagreements happening between those two bodies, right? तो अब उन disputes को solve कौन करेगा? That is where WTO again plays the third set of important rule, to resolve all the trade related disputes of various countries that are a part of WTO, right? So that is the next important function of WTO, right? Right? So that is the third. First is to liberalize trade, second is to set and enforce rules, then to resolve disputes, and then would be to make decisions in a transparent fashion. ठीक है, अब ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए that we all the countries are trading with each other, so the rules that are set that should be set in the transparent manner. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए that the rules are biased towards one country, right? तो वो कैसे होगा? When there is a one neutral body that is there, that will make rules for everybody. No single country is making rules for you, but the rules are being made by a neutral central institution for everybody, right? So that transparency is brought by WTO. It acts as the neutral, institution, neutral international institution to make decisions on the trade aspects of the world, right? So that is again an important role played by WTO. Further, the fifth role that is played, now WTO will also interact with the rest, the world's other economic institutions, right? जैसे हमने बात की World Bank की, IMF की, there can be multiple other economic institutions around the world that are performing another economic, tasks or roles, right? To coordinate with them, to promote international trade, that is also a role played by WTO. ठीक है? So that is why to cooperate with other major international economic institutions, this is again a role played by WTO. ठीक है, तो आप समझिए कि WTO का सेंट्रल अटेंशन है वर्ल्ड ट्रेड. तो वर्ल्ड ट्रेड को फर्स्टली प्रमोट करना, रेगुलेट करना, वर्ल्ड ट्रेड से होने वाले डिस्प्यूट्स को मैनेज करना, वर्ल्ड ट्रेड को प्रमोट करने के लिए इंस्टीट्यूशंस के साथ कोऑपरेट करना, एवरीथिंग इज डन बाय WTO, right? Underlining idea is to promote world trade on a large scale, but equal trade where countries benefit on equal scale, right? So that is why all these roles are being seen, right? So as I said, the idea is to promote trade benefits for every country. Developed countries हों जैसे कि USA वगैरह, सिर्फ वो benefit ना करें, बल्कि developing or less developed countries like India या South African या African countries, they should also benefit, right? So trade negotiations ऐसी होनी चाहिए that the interests of developing countries are kept in mind, right? So that is the final role of WTO, to help the developing countries benefit fully from global trading system, right? ऐसा ना हो कि जो ताकतवर countries हैं, जो developed countries हैं, they make rules and regulations in their favor, right? To prevent that and to make rules on equal grounds, WTO plays a very important role, ठीक है? So these are the set of roles that are played by WTO. Amulya, you'll get to know about everything, just wait for some time. We have just started our discussion on WTO. We'll get to know what are the functions performed by different bodies, right? अभी तक आपको इसके aims and establishment समझ आया? It started with GATT in 1945, but GATT was not fulfilling the entire purposes of promoting the world trade. So we saw the emergence of another important institution, that is WTO, in 1995 with the Marrakesh Agreement, right? Now these are the broad aims, right? Now this is how the WTO's structure looks like, right? WTO, it started with GATT, as I told you already. Then WTO was established in 1995. Now WTO has different kind of bodies and institutions under it that do the actual function. ठीक है, WTO में काम कौन करेगा, decisions कौन लेगा, disputes कौन settle करेगा, that is all being done by these, right? So सबसे पहला important institution within WTO is the Ministerial Conferences. ठीक है, so there are regular ministerial conferences that keep happening in WTO, and these minister conferences are nothing but the coming together of the finance ministers of various countries. They go there, they talk about the trade issues of the world, and they take important decisions on various matters of world trade, right? So these are important ministerial conferences that are happening under the WTO, right? Now these ministerial conferences can happen on various grounds or for various purposes, right? They can be for settling trade disputes. At that time we have a trade dispute settlement body, right? A dispute settlement body within WTO, where ministers or they'll come together here and they'll try to settle different kind of trade disputes that are happening, right? Then we have a journal council also in WTO that looks into the day to day functioning. ये आप secretariat की तरह suppose कर सकते हैं, the secretariat of WTO which performs the day to day functions, कि पूरे world में trade को monitor करते रहे, कौन सी country किस country के साथ trade में engage कर रही है, what are the rules they are following, what are the rules they are violating, right? So the day to day functioning of world trade is looked by the General Council of WTO. ठीक है, WTO में क्या क्या है? डिस्प्यूट सेटलमेंट बॉडी है, जनरल काउंसिल है, मिनिस्टीरियल कॉन्फ्रेंस है, वेयर मिनिस्टर्स, फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर्स कम टुगेदर टू engage in conversation about various aspects of world trade, right? And finally there is trade policy review body, right? As the name suggests, agar there are new changes or new reforms that have to be brought about in the trade rules, regulations or policies that are being followed by the entire world, at that time this trade policy review body will come into picture, right? This body, this works on bringing about reforms in the trade policy. ठीक है, जितनी भी पॉलिसी रूल्स रेगुलेशन सेटअप किए गए हैं ट्रेड को प्रमोट करने के लिए, उनमें जो रिफॉर्म्स आएंगे दैट आर ब्रॉट अबाउट बाय दिस बॉडी, राइट? सो दिस इज द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ WTO. इसको अच्छे से याद रखना है. व्हेनेवर देयर इज अ क्वेश्चन ऑन WTO, डू मेक दिस डायग्राम. WTO पे कुछ भी क्वेश्चन आए, इस डायग्राम को पक्का बनाइए. यू विल गेट एडिशनल मार्क्स इन योर आंसर. जितना भी आप लिख रहे हैं, आधा मार्क, 1 मार्क जरूर आपको एक्स्ट्रा मिलेगा इसके लिए, राइट? नाउ another important fact that about WTO that we need to discuss is, why was there a need to replace GATT, the agreement, Journal Agreement on Tariffs and Trade? उसको replace करके why was there a need to bring about WTO, right? So वो 5 factors देखने हैं. The first very important factor is that GATT was just an agreement. It was just an agreement, or you can say a protocol that the countries were following. There was no such institutional body that existed under GATT. ठीक है, वहां पे कोई भी ऐसी कोई बिल्डिंग नहीं थी, कोई मेंबर्स नहीं थे जहां बैठ के वो ट्रेड के बारे में बात करते थे. इट वाज जस्ट एन अग्रीमेंट रेगुलेटिंग द ट्रेड, वर्ल्ड ट्रेड, राइट? सो टू प्रोवाइड दैट इंस्टीट्यूशन, ठीक है, दैट इज व्हाई WTO वाज सेट अप. आप जस्ट rough example, let's say, just a very rough example, let's say कि आपने जुडिशरी की प्रोविजन तो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में बना दी, बट देयर इज नो बिल्डिंग फॉर सुप्रीम कोर्ट ऑफ इंडिया, राइट? सो वो कैसे ही फंक्शन कर पाएगी, राइट? आपके कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में जुडिशरी की प्रोविजन है कि देयर विल बी अ जुडिशरी दैट विल फैसिलिटेट ग्रीवियंस सेटलमेंट ऑफ द सिटीजंस, बट देयर इज नो एक्चुअल सुप्रीम कोर्ट और हाई कोर्ट इन द कंट्री, right? So that was the position in this case. GATT, there was a agreement, but there was no systemized institution to manage the world trade. So that institutional setup was provided by WTO. That is why we saw the emergence of WTO to give an institutional backing to this agreement. ठीक है, जुडिशरी की प्रोविजन तो बना दी, अब सुप्रीम कोर्ट, हाई कोर्ट भी एस्टैब्लिश करो, right? So that was the case. That was the first reason why WTO had to be brought up, right? The second is there was no dispute settlement body under GATT. As I told you, वहाँ पे कोई भी organization नहीं थी, कोई भी institution नहीं था GATT के अंदर. It was just a agreement, right? तो अब जब भी लड़ाइयाँ होती थी तो solve कौन करेगा? Whenever there is dispute, who will be the party that will solve the disputes? So for that purpose also a dispute settlement body was required, which was established with the WTO itself. Again, WTO का vision to solve disputes between various nations based on trade, right? That was again solved by this body. right? Now the next reason why WTO had to be brought out instead of GATT is that it provided for representation of the developing countries, right? अब देखिए जो आपका GATT है, that was established in 1947. Most of the countries were colonized at this time, so they did not have very good representation in the formation of GATT. But by 1995, majority of the world was decolonized. They had their independent sovereign leaders. So it was better, for setting up a new institution that presented the views of developing countries also, like India, Africa में इतनी countries है that got decolonized very late in the 20th century, right? So to give representation to the interests of these developing countries also, WTO was established. ठीक है? So that was the next important aim for establishing WTO in place of GATT, right? Do make a note of all these points. इसे आप answers लिखते हुए अपना, you can use these while writing your answers. These will be very instrumental in writing good answers for your, mains. So आप ये point wise fashion में सब लिख के रखिए. Whatever I have presented here, it will come very handy, right? Now the next or the fourth reason why we needed WTO in place of GATT is that, देखिए GATT के अंदर only trade in goods was being regulated और facilitated, ठीक है? जैसे कि अगर आप किसी को पेन बेच रहे हैं, बुक बेच रहे हैं, शूज बेच रहे हैं, that means goods are being regulated, but not the services. For example, if I am providing education to somebody sitting in USA, right? So I am trading in service. So education is a service, healthcare is a service, tourism is a service. So that those services were not being regulated by GATT, right? Those services were not being regulated under GATT. So to regulate trade in services, we needed WTO, right? That was the one major reason. Then also intellectual property rights. अब देखिए आप कोई भी innovation का काम करते हैं, you get copyrights or property rights on that. If you have written any poem, right? If you have written a book of poems, that is your property. You have a right on that creative work, right? You get copyrights for that work. So all these was not present under GATT. For these also we needed WTO, a new organization which will focus on the intellectual property rights, ठीक है? जो हम दिमाग से अपने wealth property create करते हैं, उसके ऊपर rights को regulate करना, उनके trade को regulate करना, that will be done by WTO, right? So ऐसे ही बहुत सारी चीज़ें थी, बहुत सारे aspects थे that were not covered by GATT, right? As the world evolves, new aspects emerge. अभी भी आप देखिए WTO does not has much rules and regulation for e-commerce sector, right? So what is happening? These new ministerial conferences, they are trying to bring about reforms to make WTO adapt to the new changes, ठीक है? So उस टाइम पे भी यही हो रहा था. GATT was not satisfying the needs of the economy, of the world economy at that time. It did not deal with services, it did not deal with IPRs, it did not deal well with investments, right? So इसीलिए WTO को create किया गया. And now we see reforms in WTO itself to include all the new changes or phenomena that we see emerging, जैसे कि e-commerce, digital marketing, digital services, Flipkart, Amazon, all those stuff, right? Are you getting all this? Right? So IPR is nothing. You will read about this in detail in your economy part. Here we have restriction on what I can teach you, but broadly I'll tell you IPR, intellectual property right. ठीक है? नाम से ही you can understand very much about IPR. Intellectual, that means जो अपने mind से you create something new, something innovative, something of your own, right? So that becomes your property, right? आपकी property बन गई है, you should have some rights over that property, that who can use your intellectual work, who can make use of your intellectual work. आपने नया गाना लिख दिया, आपने नई पोएम लिख दी, आपने नया कोई लोगो इंट्रोड्यूस कर दिया. There can be multiple ways in which you might have created something new. Now you have the right over that new creation of yours, right? That is what is IPR, intellectual property rights. For your innovative work, you get some rights for which other people will pay you if they want to use your mental creation, right? वो broadly IPRs है. IPRs के अंडर बहुत कुछ आता है, copyrights, ट्रेडमार्क्स, पेटेंट्स, ठीक है. ये डिफरेंट कैटेगरीज आप किसी ना किसी सब्जेक्ट में अपने पढ़ेंगे, राइट. बेसिक ब्रॉड लाइन आइडिया यू गेट इट हेयर, राइट. सो GATT was made to accommodate the new needs of the world economy, right. And finally, GATT talked only about trade barriers या tax barriers, but non-tax barriers were not talked about by the GATT. Can you tell me what are non-tax barriers? Can you give me some examples of non-tax barriers? आपने इकोनॉमी पार्ट में पढ़ा होगा, आपने WTO भी पढ़ा होगा, आई थिंक. Can you tell me that, give me example of non-tariff barriers? Subsidy, Suraj? Do you think subsidy is a non-tariff barrier? See, देखिए, just try to understand this. So, you have trade happening between country A and B. ठीक है, इंडिया एंड चाइना, लेट्स सपोज. तो अब चाइना ने अगर इंडिया से अपना ट्रेड कम करना है, इफ चाइना वांट्स टू रिड्यूस द अमाउंट ऑफ ट्रेड दैट इज कमिंग फ्रॉम इंडिया, सो उसके पास दो वेज है. फर्स्ट वेज तो है कि वो टैक्स लगा दे. इंडिया अगर कुछ भी बेच रहा है, लेट्स से पेन्स इंडिया इज सेलिंग एट 10 रुपीज, चाइना टैक्स लगाएगा, उसे 20 रुपया बना दिया. When the pens reach in China, let's say it costs 20 rupees per pen. So उससे क्या हो रहा है, चाइना के जो इंटरनल पेन्स हैं they are costing about 8 to 10 rupees and Indian pen is becoming uncompetitive there, right? So India loses the market of China. So these trade tax benefits have to be reduced so that Indian products are treated on equal level with the Chinese product, right? That is the first focus of WTO कि tax barriers को कम किया जाए, ठीक है, customs duties जो लगती हैं, right? Second is non-tax barriers. Non-tax barriers. अब for example, if India sells mangoes to China or Europe, और ये real example है, India sells mangoes to Europe, but Europe वाले क्या कह के मना कर देते हैं कि इंडियन मैंगोज में बहुत केमिकल्स हैं, फर्टिलाइजर्स यूज किए हैं, पेस्टिसाइड्स यूज किए हैं, एंड वी कैन नॉट लेट अवर पॉपुलेशन कंज्यूम सच प्रोडक्ट्स दैट आर लो इन क्वालिटी, right, because of the use of fertilizers and pesticides. So they are also banning the entry of products from India in a different way. अब वो टैक्स नहीं इंक्रीज कर रहे, बट वो और कंडीशंस लगाई जा रहे हैं कि हमारा फूड इज नॉट हेल्दी फॉर देयर पॉपुलेशन, राइट. सो दैट इज नॉन टैक्स बैरियर व्हेन यू अप्लाई नॉन इकोनॉमिक बैरियर्स, राइट. Sanction is not, sanction is something different. Sanction, throws away the concept of WTO. Sanction is a measure that is used by countries to restrict some activity of another country. Sanction is kind of a tool to stop a violent country, you may say. Sanction is not related to non-tax barriers, ठीक है. यहाँ पे हम civilized countries के trade की बात कर रहे हैं, ठीक है. So that is how it is. Quality requirements, you may say, are the non-tax barriers. फाइटो सैनिटरी एंड फाइटो सैनिटरी मेजर्स आपने सुना होगा, सैनिटरी एंड फाइटो सैनिटरी मेजर्स, WTO में ये आप पढ़ेंगे, एक स्पेसिफिक अग्रीमेंट है, दैट इज वेयर द कंट्रीज टॉक अबाउट द क्वालिटी ऑफ द स्टफ दैट इज कमिंग इन। सो इस बेसिस पे भी वो ट्रेड को लिमिट करने की कोशिश करती हैं, राइट। सो इनको भी रिड्यूस करना इज द ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ WTO विच वॉज नॉट इंक्लूडेड बाय GATT, सो दैट इज वाई WTO वॉज इंट्रोड्यूस्ड। ठीक है, हाँ, quota requirements you can consider. Boycott, no, it's all the same. Boycott, sanctions, they are another different scenario, not related to WTO and all. Okay, now the important part for our discussion, the 12th Ministerial Conference that happened this week, right? This is very important from exam perspective. इसमें क्या क्या decisions लिए गए, that we are going to see, right? So सबसे पहला decision is related to the fisheries sector. देखिए पूरी दुनिया में there is lot of fishing activity that is happening. अब Japan, India, China, Philippines, Vietnam, all these countries, they extract lot of fish from the waters and they earn lot of money from that, right? So what is happening now is that the सस्टेनेबिलिटी ऑफ फिशिंग इज बीइंग क्वेश्चनड। जैसे आपने बहुत बार पढ़ा होगा, इंडिया श्रीलंका के बीच भी बॉटम ट्रॉलर्स यूज किए जाते हैं, जिससे ओशियन में रहने वाले जानवरों को, कोरल रीफ्स को बहुत नुकसान पहुंचता है। देयर इज डायनामाइट फिशिंग ऑल्सो, वेयर डायनामाइट इज बीइंग यूज्ड टू make the fish lifeless kind of, and then it is caught. So there are various such fishing methods, cyanide fishing, dynamite fishing, bottom trawlers. All these fishing methods jo hai, they harm the ocean ecology a lot. So the focus of WTO is to ensure that such activities are controlled, and such activities happen on the basis of the subsidies that are provided by countries. जैसे इंडिया में we provide a lot of subsidies to our fishermen to go and fish in the oceans. ठीक है, उसके लिए हम उनको बॉटम ट्रॉलर्स भी देते हैं, टेक्नोलॉजी भी देते हैं, पैसा भी देते हैं, so that they can extract more fish from the ocean. ठीक है, so जितनी ज़्यादा एक्सट्रैक्टिव, इंटेंस एक्सट्रैक्टिव पॉलिसी होगी, that would mean the impact on the ecology, environment, the life of the ocean will be high, right? So इसीलिए WTO wants to control the fishery subsidies that impact the life of the ocean, that leads to overfishing or unsustainable fishing. So WTO ऐसी सारी फिशिंग सब्सिडीज को कंट्रोल करना चाहता है that promotes overfishing or unsustainable fishing. So that is why the first decision of this conference is to prohibit certain forms of fishery subsidies that contribute to overcapacity and overfishing or unsustainable fishing, you can say. ठीक है, hope you have understood this first point. The focus of this 12th bottom trawling, you can check these words on the internet, please. I do not have bottom trawling. It's a technology to extract more and more fish, right? Just to see its pictures on Google, you'll get to know what it is. It's I have discussed it in many other sessions. If you have heard the Indo-Pacific session that I took on Thursday, the first Thursday video, so there I explained all these aspects, but here briefly understand that it is an unsustainable form of fishing practice. ठीक है, उससे ओशन टोपोग्राफी जो होती है, हमारी ओशन का बेसिन जो होता है, वो बहुत इम्पैक्ट होता है. That is why such kind of fishery subsidies are to be regulated by WTO. Right? Now the next focus is on the COVID vaccine. Right? We all know that COVID struck the entire world very badly. ठीक है, पूरी दुनिया में हाहाकार मच गया था, यू कैन से, बिकॉज ऑफ कोविड, राइट. सो उसकी वजह से क्या हो रहा था कि so उसकी वजह से क्या था, that because of COVID people were dying everywhere, and that is why we see the emergence of different kind of vaccines. COVID vaccine, Covishield, Covax, इस पे prelims में today this year there was question also UPSC prelims में about these various vaccines, very important are they also, ठीक है. So but अब यहाँ पे क्या issue is that there were only few privileged countries that had the access to those vaccines. India में बनी थी, UK में बनी थी, Australia में बनी थी. But there are many poorer countries in Africa, in Asia that did not have access to this vaccine, right? So there was a demand by countries, especially led by India, that we should give a vaccine to all the other nations, and we should waive the IPR requirements for that. ठीक है, intellectual property जैसे मैंने अभी आपको समझाया, because this vaccine is a product of innovation of some company, so that company has rights on the vaccine making process, right? किसी कंपनी ने बहुत दिमाग लगा के, रिसोर्सेज लगा के वैक्सीन क्रिएट की है, अब उसको राइट्स मिलेंगे उस वैक्सीन को सेल करने के, जिसको वो चाहे वैक्सीन प्रोवाइड कर सकती है बट वापस पैसा लेगी, राइट? तो पुअर कंट्रीज जो हैं, दे कैन नॉट पे सो मच मनी फॉर दीज IPRs, so partial IPR waiver has been talked about, right? इसमें अलाउ किया गया है कि डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज लाइक इंडिया, दे विल प्रोड्यूस एंड दे विल एक्सपोर्ट दीज वैक्सीन टू पुअरर कंट्रीज ऑफ साउथ अफ्रीका और एशिया. तो कोई भी कंट्री IPR के बेसिस पे दिस ट्रेड दे कैन नॉट रिस्ट्रिक्ट, because this is an emergency. COVID is a pandemic that is killing so many people, so we need to help them with the vaccines, right? So for that purpose IPRs have been partially waived for COVID vaccine under this ministerial conference, right? Now the third set of decision, right? I hope यहाँ तक आपको भी समझ आया है. Right? So the next set of factor is maintaining a moratorium on e-commerce tariffs. ठीक है? So WTO ने क्या डिसाइड किया है, that जितना भी e-commerce होता है, जैसे कि आपका Facebook, Amazon, Flipkart, all those businesses that are happening in this digital sphere, there will be little or no tariffs or taxation on this e-commerce side of the economy, right? ताकि e-commerce को promote कर दिया जाए, free flow of data हो, and this data is now being used to provide various services to the people. आप देखिए, if you are searching for a hospital or a hotel also, if you type it once in Google, you will see it appearing everywhere on your Google page, on your phone page, right? It's kind of they are taking your data to give you, you know, directed feedback. आपको अच्छे अच्छे hotels जो आपकी requirement है वो दिखाएंगे. अब this data has use also, misuse also, but this data, because it has use, that is why the WTO says that we should promote a free flow of data in the digital sphere, in the e-commerce sphere, so there should not be any taxation on the e-commerce side, right? So although India has some concerns, we will discuss with that regard to that, but these are the three broad main reasons, main outcomes of the 12th Ministerial Conference of WTO. इनका आप नोट बना के रखिए. फिशरीज की सब्सिडीज को लिमिट करना है. ऑल दो सब्सिडीज दैट लीड टू overfishing or unsustainable fishing will be limited by this agreement, by this conference, right? Then partial IPR waiver will be provided on COVID vaccines, right? And then finally, yeah, now I think the boys will be there, right? Yes, yeah. So these three are the main decisions, right? Now we will see कि India के concerns क्या है with regard to these decisions and these outcomes of the ministerial conference, right? So the first concern of India is that on the fisheries sector itself, ठीक है, इंडिया क्या कहता है कि हमें the fishery subsidies that you are telling us to remove, give us 25 years time to phase out those services. ठीक है, तो वो क्या क्या phase out those subsidies. ठीक है, जैसे मैंने आपको पहले ही बताया, इंडिया अपने फार्मर्स को बहुत सारी सब्सिडीज देता है, फिशरमैन को सॉरी, सो दैट द फिशरमैन आर एबल टू एक्सट्रैक्ट मोर फिश एंड अर्न मोर मनी, राइट. तो अब इंडिया क्या कह रहा है कि एकदम से तो हम सब्सिडीज नहीं खत्म कर सकते, देर आर लॉट ऑफ फिशरमैन दैट आर डिपेंडेंट ऑन दो सब्सिडीज, सो गिव अस 25 years ऑफ टाइम टू ग्रेजुअली रिड्यूस और remove those subsidies. So that is why that is the first concern where India says that give us 25-year period to phase out the subsidies, and also that 200 nautical miles tak give us that freedom to provide the subsidies कि यहाँ तक फिशरमैन जा सकते हैं, right. So that is the first concern. याद रखना है कि India is asking for a phase out period of 25 years, right. That is important. Second is e-commerce. As I told you, Amazon, Facebook वगैरह, they do business in our country and they pay taxes to USA. अब USA में अगर company profit लेके जा रही है, it is paying tax to the USA government. Now Indian government says कि आप सारा पैसा you are earning from this country, this land, from our people, and you are not paying the tax. How that can be the situation? So that is why India has also imposed equalization levies, right. ये आपने बहुत टर्म सुनी होगी न्यूज़ में, इसे लिख के रखिए, यूपीएससी में भी ऑलरेडी पूछा जा चुका है कि व्हाट इज इक्वलाइजेशन लेवी, राइट. सो ये जो ई कॉमर्स फॉर्म्स हैं like Facebook, like Google, all these have to pay taxation in India, that is the equalization levy, right. Now so now India is fearing that कि जो नए rules आ रहे हैं that can give these companies the liberty to access Indian market without any trade or tax. ठीक है, जैसे हमने यहाँ यही डिस्कस किया कि ये क्या चाहते हैं कि on all the e-commerce transactions the tariffs should not be there. जितना भी फेसबुक, गूगल वगैरह हमारे यहाँ से पैसा कमा रहे हैं, they should not be taxed on that, right. Now this is a concern for India. India says कि आप हमारी इकोनॉमी में से इतना पैसा जनरेट कर रहे हो, why will you not pay taxes to us, right. So this is India's concern that these rules will give unfair advantage to these big countries in India, to these foreign countries in India. अब इनकी वजह से हमारे जो होम ग्रोन स्मॉल एंटरप्रेन्योर्स है वो भी ग्रो नहीं कर पाते. आप देखिए चाइना में तो दे हैव चाइना का ओन फेसबुक, चाइना का ओन यूट्यूब, चाइना का ओन गूगल, देयर ओन कंपनीज हैव ग्रोन. But here, because these foreign companies are present, our startups are not able to survive, and we are not able to, not even able to tax these companies also. तो हमारे लिए तो डबल डिसएडवांटेज हो गया, राइट. Right. So this is what it is. What is the next concern, right. Now the third concern of India is related to the food subsidies. तो जो पीस क्लॉज के बारे में कोई यहाँ पे डाउट पूछ रहा था, सो ये इशू बहुत देर से चलता आ रहा है. देखिए वी ऑल नो दैट इंडिया प्रोवाइड्स लॉट ऑफ सब्सिडीज टू आवर फार्मर्स इन वेरियस वेज. हमने इतनी सारी स्कीम्स लॉन्च की हैं, हम फर्टिलाइजर पे सब्सिडी देते हैं, हम MSP के फॉर्म में, दैट इज द बिगेस्ट सब्सिडी दैट वी गिव इन द फॉर्म ऑफ MSP, मिनिमम सपोर्ट प्राइस, राइट. Now what the world body thinks that this MSP is a trade distorting subsidy, कि इसकी वजह से क्या हो रहा है कि इंडियन फार्मर्स जो हैं सस्ते रेट पे इंटरनेशनल मार्केट पे अपनी क्रॉप बेच पाते हैं, बिकॉज दे गेट गुड पेमेंट फ्रॉम द इंडियन गवर्नमेंट. इस वजह से जो इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड है वो डिस्टॉर्ट हो रहा है. दैट इज वाई WTO हैज बीन आस्किंग अस टू रिड्यूस दिस subsidies, but India says that we provide these subsidies to the farmers because we want to make our buffer stock. गवर्नमेंट क्या करती है, किसानों को ये सब्सिडी देके, MSP देके, government is procuring food from the farmer so that government can store that food grains to serve the food needs of the population. ठीक है, अपना बफर स्टॉक क्रिएट करके रखती है. तो इसीलिए इंडिया यहाँ यही कह रहा है कि ऐसी लिमिट जो आप फूड सब्सिडीज पे लगाते हैं, दैट इज गोइंग टुवर्ड us meeting the food needs of our population, these restrictions should be reduced, right? So इसीलिए कह रहे हैं India wants assurance that its public stock holding program, ठीक है, पब्लिक स्टॉक होल्डिंग प्रोग्राम, ठीक है, MSP के अंडर जो हम जो हम क्रॉप से क्रॉप ग्रेन्स जो हैं स्टोर करके रखते हैं, जो हम फिर नेशनल फूड सिक्योरिटी एक्ट के अंडर लोगों को बेच देते हैं, राइट? सो उसके लिए एश्योरेंसेस चाहिए कि वी विल बी अलाउड टू कंटिन्यू विद दीज MSP प्रोग्राम, विद दी स्टॉक होल्डिंग प्रोग्राम अंडर फूड सिक्योरिटी एक्ट, राइट? सो ये इशू बहुत देर से चल रहा है, इसके अंडर ही पीस क्लॉज भी आप पढ़ेंगे इन डिटेल, राइट? सो उसी के लिए ये नेक्स्ट कंसर्न भी है. इंडिया जस्ट वांट्स दैट द फूड सब्सिडीज दैट इट इज प्रोवाइडिंग टू इट्स फार्मर्स इन द फॉर्म ऑफ MSP, दैट शुड बी अलाउड टू रिमेन इन फंक्शन, दैट शुड नॉट बी banned by WTO. That is the concern, right? Finally, on vaccines, India wants the waiver on IPR rights of vaccines should वही to waive off IPR rights. सो वही कह रहा है, इंडिया चाहता है कि जो गरीब कंट्रीज हैं उनके पास वैक्सीन पहुंच पाए, राइट? फॉर दैट व्हाट इंडिया वांट्स कि यहाँ पे IPR रिक्वायरमेंट्स रिस्ट्रिक्शंस नहीं होनी चाहिए, दे शुड बी कंप्लीटली वेव्ड ऑफ. दैट इज व्हाट इंडिया इज डिमांडिंग हेयर इन दिस इशू, राइट? सो दीज आर ऑल ब्रीफली इंडियाज कंसर्न. थोड़ा आप ये फिशरीज, फूड और ई-कॉमर्स का लिख के रखिए. दीज आर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, यू कैन यूज इट वेन एवर देर इज अ क्वेश्चन ऑन WTO एंड इंडियाज रिलेशन. उसमें आप क्रिटिकली एनालाइज में लिख सकते हैं दैट इंडिया हैज दीज कंसर्न्स विद WTO. इसका फूड सिक्योरिटी प्रोग्राम इज गेटिंग इम्पैक्टेड बिकॉज ऑफ WTO's decisions, राइट? इसकी फिशरमैन आर गेटिंग इम्पैक्टेड बिकॉज ऑफ WTO's decision. India's e-commerce sector is also not able to grow at optimum level because of the decisions of WTO. उस तरीके से आप ये points use कर सकते हैं, right? These are some more issues that or concerns that are faced by India or that are put across by India. India क्या कहता है, special and differential treatment जो है वो maintain रहना चाहिए. Special and differential, that there are some countries that are less developed, that are not very well developed, they do not have that much trade, they do not have that much economy. तो उनके लिए अलग टाइप ऑफ रूल्स होने चाहिए, उनके लिए लाइटर रूल्स होने चाहिए. रिस्ट्रिक्शंस ऑन ट्रेड शुड बी लेस, ठीक है? सो उन्हें स्पेशल एंड डिफरेंशियल ट्रीटमेंट मिलना चाहिए. दैट इज व्हाट दे आर सेइंग. स्पेशल एंड डिफरेंशियल ट्रीटमेंट मस्ट कंटिन्यू, ऑलरेडी एग्जिस्ट करता है ये WTO में, but India is saying we should carry this on, we should not remove such provisions. Why? Because as such treatment has been a treaty embedded and non-negotiable right for all developing members. ठीक है, हम याद कीजिए हमने कहा कि WTO क्यों एस्टैब्लिश हुआ था GATT की जगह, because it wanted to ensure the interest of developing countries. ठीक है, तो इसीलिए इंडिया कह रहा है कि ये इसका ओरिजिन ही WTO का हमारे राइट्स को, हमारे कंसर्न्स को प्रेजेंट करने के लिए हुआ है. सो फॉर दैट मेजर there should be special and differential treatment for these developing and least developed countries. We cannot be treated as equal to USA or European nations that have completed their developmental process. So हमें कुछ special privileges मिलती रहनी चाहिए, right? This is again a very important point, right? फाइनली इंडिया सेज कि मल्टीलेटरलिज्म के प्रिंसिपल्स जो हैं हमें फॉलो करते रहने चाहिए. सो द प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ ट्रांसपेरेंसी, नॉन डिस्क्रिमिनेशन और प्रिडिक्टेबिलिटी, all of these should be followed by the world body while making rules on trade, right? While making rules on trade, right? So that is, yeah, that is all about World Trade Organization. Basically we discussed the establishment of WTO, how it replaced GATT, why it had to replace GATT, that also we discussed. Then it's 6 broad aims, 6 वो aims याद रखिए, जब भी कोई question आए WTO का you can use them. Then we discussed the structure of WTO, Ministerial Conference, then trade, dispute resolution body, dispute settlement body, General Council, and then Trade Policy Review Committee. That also, that structure you can always use in your diagram, in your answers. ठीक है. सो इस तरीके से ये पूरी कॉन्वर्सेशन, देन दी डिस्कशन ऑन 12th मिनिस्टीरियल कॉन्फ्रेंस, that will help you in answering your various questions, right? Now, so another topic that is important that we'll discuss, that is Sant Tukaram. He is a major saint in the Bhakti movement. You all have read about Bhakti movement in your culture part. If you have not yet read, you will read it. It is a very important movement, Bhakti movement. We have already discussed one important saint of Bhakti movement, that is Sant Kabir Das, right? Uske बारे में भी you can read, that is also a very important one. Now in this video we will discuss about Sant Tukaram, right? So now why is it in news, why we are discussing this specific personality now? Because our Prime Minister has inaugurated Sant Tukaram Shila Mandir इन पुणे डिस्ट्रिक्ट. तो उन्होंने संत तुकाराम के नाम पे एक नया मंदिर बनवाया है, इनॉग्रेट किया है. सो ऑब्वियसली दिस मंदिर इज ऑल्सो इम्पॉर्टेंट फॉर योर एग्जाम, एंड संत तुकाराम एंड हिज फिलोसफीज एंड हिज वर्क्स आर ऑल्सो इम्पॉर्टेंट, राइट? सो इसीलिए इसे हम डिटेल में डिस्कस करेंगे. सो सबसे पहले तो अबाउट संत तुकाराम. नाउ ही इज अ भक्ति रिफॉर्मर, एज आई टोल्ड यू, राइट? सो अब देखिए, जो भक्ति मूवमेंट लॉन्च हुई थी, इफ यू हैव ऑलरेडी रेड अबाउट इट, इट वाज अगेंस्ट so it was against, Bhakti movement was basically launched against all forms of caste discrimination, gender discrimination और ideal worship, ritualism. जो भी ब्राह्मणिज्म में जितने भी फॉल्ट्स थे, डिवाइड्स थे, इनइक्वालिटी के फीचर्स थे, all were rejected by Bhakti movement, right? They did not want any discrimination based on caste, any discrimination based on gender, any discrimination created by idol worship or following ritualism. Rituals का क्या मतलब है? Ceremonies वगैरह वो कौन लॉक कर सकते हैं? Only अमीर people or wealthy people can perform rituals and ceremonies because they have the money to put in those rituals and ceremonies. कितना कितना पैसा जाता है आप कोई भी ceremony कराते हैं. So again it creates divides among wealthy and non-wealthy people. So इन सब चीज़ों को reject करने के लिए ही we saw the emergence of Bhakti movement. So all these saints of Bhakti movement, they belonged to the lower caste and they rejected all kinds of discrimination. They proposed the idea of equality and universal brotherhood. सारे इक्वल ट्रीट होने चाहिए, किसी भी तरीके का भेदभाव नहीं होना चाहिए. That was the underlining idea of Bhakti movement. So Sant Tukaram also supported the idea of equality, ending all kinds of discriminations, right? So that was his idea. similar is written here also, that there is no pride in promoting the idea of caste. Pride of caste is never made any man holy, right? He says कि caste में अपना caste के base पे अपना robe जमाना, that will not make you a holy man, right? Rather treating everyone equally will, right? So that was his basic message. Now, who was the teacher or the guru of Sant Tukaram himself? That was Sant Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. As I have already told you, this personality is also very important. इन पे question already UPSC में पूछा गया है, right? So Sant Tukaram के गुरु भी Sant Chaitanya Mahaprabhu थे, also belonging to Bhakti movement, right? The next important fact is that Sant Tukaram was the contemporary of Shivaji. जब शिवाजी एग्जिस्ट करते थे, at that time Sant Tukaram used to exist. These kind of questions are sometimes asked in the prelims examination. That is why I am giving this fact to you, right? Now, what are the major contributions of Sant Tukaram? He established the Vathoba cult. He made the Vathoba cult popular in the country, especially महाराष्ट्र वगैरह साइड में. जो आप विट्ठल भगवान सुनते हैं, विट्ठल भगवान, right? उनका culture was made popular by Sant Tukaram only, right? So this Vithoba cult was made popular by him, right? He also wrote many songs on Vitthal or Vittla Swami God, and those were called as abhangas. The songs that he wrote for Vitthala Swami, that was called as abhangas, right? So this is again important. Now, Sant Tukaram was central to the Varakari sect. ठीक है, जैसे मैंने आपको बताया कि इन्होंने ये विठला जो कल्ट है ये महाराष्ट्र वाले एरिया में फेमस किया, तो उसको वाराकारी सेक्ट भी कहा जाता है, right? So Varakari sect के through he spread the bhakti for Lord Vitthala, right? So in that way his contributions are very important, significant for today's world. He gave us the Vitthala Swami cult. He made songs in the form of abhangas, and he also started this Varakari sect, right? So obviously Varakari pilgrimage was also started, right? So that is the important features about Sant Tukaram and his contribution, right? I hope you have all understood. We'll end the session here only for today, because we have discussed two very important and detailed topics. Please घर पे जाइए and you read more about WTO के जो various agreements हैं, try to read them also. They'll be helpful for you. Trips, ट्रिप्स एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट आपने सुना होगा इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी पे अगेन, राइट? देन यू विल हैव कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव कवरेज ऑन WTO, राइट? सो हाँ, लेबर विल स्टडी अबाउट चाइल्ड लेबर डे, और जो 2 टॉपिक रह गए हैं वी विल डिस्कस इन द नेक्स्ट सेट ऑफ वीडियोस, आपके अगले हफ्ते में कवर हो जाएंगे, डोंट वरी अबाउट दैट, ठीक है? वो सारा डिटेल में आपको मैं कराऊंगी दोबारा से थर्सडे को, राइट? फॉर नाउ विल एंड दिस सेशन, ओके? Okay, so if you have any doubt, post it in the comment section, we'll respond to that. Thank you so much for joining.